Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Wednesday. You made it halfway through the work week already. Congratulations. Pat yourself on the shoulder. I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports Today. Joining me today to start off the show is Danny Williams. You catch Danny Williams on Mile High Sports Radio every single day with his partner, Jeff Gersh. How's it going?
Sean, thanks for having me. Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, obviously, I'm walking out. I'm walking into the station today as your show with Jeff wraps up, and you have the girls from Hooters.
We have the Hooters girls here. We're riding a high right now. Okay, so we're cooking right now, and thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm not a Hooters girl. What do you need from me? I will deliver for you.
Yeah, obviously, when you pick up the latest Mile High Sports magazine, you catch that all over the metro area. Obviously, have a Bo Nix flavored or Deion Sanders flavored one to grab, and in there we have breakdowns of all the local football teams in the pro and college. With the girls from Hooters spent some time.
Magazine's beautiful.
Putting that together with us. Yeah,
I've called it for years a local Sports Illustrated, and I mean it with all my heart and soul. The magazine's a banger. It's a thing of beauty. It's nice.
Yeah. The modern design right now. You see right over our head, the Bo Nix one is out there as well. But I wanted to start with the Broncos. Obviously, the 2-2 start. I'm a little surprised by the 2-2 start. Not massively surprised, although if you would have asked me which of the two games I thought they would have won, I would have said Seattle and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But here they are winning the two on the road with Tampa Bay and the Jets. But the one thing that I think stands out besides the defense, which has clearly been the MVP of the whole team, this is a defense-first squad, is the fact that Sean Payton has had, let's just say, challenges committing to the run game. And these are something that he's admitted. He's talked about how he needs to be more consistent in calling run plays for the Broncos. In the game against the Jets in the first half, they still called more pass plays in that first half, where even Aaron Rodgers couldn't hold on to the ball. So I don't know why they thought Bo Nix could, but they had more success on the ground, and that's led to victories. Let me give you these couple numbers and see if they surprise you. I suspect they won't. In the first two games, 44 carries, 163 yards. That's fewer than 4 yards per carry, and a touchdown. In weeks 3 and 4, both wins, 59 carries, 262 yards, which is 4.4 per, and a pair of touchdowns. Look, you run, you control the clock. You run, you start setting up play action. You run, you take the pressure off of your rookie quarterback. Are the Broncos overcomplicating this?
No, there's pros and cons to what you're saying. So what you're saying is true. Hey, there's a little bit of a comms to CU there. You run the ball to stay in games that you know that maybe you're out talented in, like the Broncos are going to be a lot of times this season. So we have a metric of kind of the Seahawks and the Steelers. As you look back, okay, let's go back in time to the beginning of the season, okay? Sorry, that's something we do on our show.
Sure.
So you go back in time, and you're like, the Seahawks and the Steelers, Russ, we got that vengeance stuff. They got a new young coach in Seattle. Well, Seattle, the Steelers, and then Tampa Bay, before the Broncos got to Tampa Bay, were a collective 8-0.
Correct.
A collective 8-0. So, like we thought, like anyone before the start of a season, you look at this team and you think, well, based off of what came and went, what you might think of them. There's not enough stars in Seattle. Well, you go to a metric with like, yeah, the Broncos, you might have thought those should have been wins. Okay, maybe they should have been, but these last two games they won were should have been losses. Right. So if we're on a Sandy Clough long equation kind of metric thing here, it takes me to basically a place where it's like the Broncos are 2-2, could be maybe a 3-1. A lot of guys had them 1-3. So where are we really sitting? John Fox took us in those chunks of quarters of a season. He taught us to look at the season in quarters, and you're 2-2. You're barely getting your feet wet. You're winning despite the quarterback. And what you're saying is true. If you're going to stay in these games, win these close first 1 to 20 games, how do you do it? By running the ball, even if it's like the Buffs at a 3 yard per chunk kind of ratio, because you keep it true and consistent. And you're trying to set up the big plays with the runs. You can't abandon you can't abandon the run.
No, because you have to keep the defenses honest. You have to believe that there is still a threat that you might be able to run and control the clock, control the pace. And the thing about the running game that I've tried to explain to people over the years is that I get it. The passing game's sexier. It's more fun to watch. Yeah. It's more exciting. I understand all of that. But at the same time, the running game is an investment, and it's an investment specifically. And I think the point you made of when you're the team with the lesser amount of talent. Let's take
Yeah.
it to let's do a college basketball metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're Princeton in the days Pete Carroll was coaching, and you're
backdoor screens.
and you're taking on North Carolina. Well, look, you have on paper you have no chance, and you're probably going to lose that game. But you saw how many times teams that use that offense, Joe Scott for a while did it with the Denver Pioneers, did it with Air Force as well. And you find yourself in games late because you have sort of controlled the pace. You've invested in frustrating your opponent. You've worn them down a little bit. And now all of a sudden you're in a one-score game and you have a puncher's chance to take this. The Broncos 2 losses by 1 score. And one play either way gets you the win. And in both of those losses, I think I look at it and realize when Bo Nix was the leading rusher in both of those first 2 games.
That's the recipe for disaster.
That's disaster. And
that's like
a
last gasp. We're desperate. Let's run the quarterback every play. A little bit of kind of like what the Bills do to Josh Allen. I mean, they're more talented and they're kind of ascending and stuff like that, but you don't want that. You don't want that. That's why the Bills are committing to the run more themselves this season.
Even the Ravens don't want that with Lamar Jackson.
No.
That's why they went out and got Derrick Henry. That needs to be your
And those are real
option.
athletes at the quarterback position. We don't know that Bo Nix is a real athlete at the quarterback position.
Well, I don't think he is in the Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
Well, let's talk about the come up, spring, training camp and preseason. We're talking about like the savvy and things like that, not like the legs and the athleticism. That's a last call, desperate disaster waiting to happen. So what you said, I liked. It made me think of, maybe in conclusion here, it's like what the Broncos are as a whole. You have to accept who and what you are. Okay, check this out. I don't mean me. You're a guy. You're a recently divorced man. You got a couple of pounds. You haven't hit that gym yet. You're looking for a bounce back. I don't think you're going to go pull that supermodel. You're not going to go pull Miss Colorado. You got to kind of take what you can get a little bit. Be realistic with who and what you are. And the Broncos can't go score 30 at will, 26, 23 if they wanted to. If you're the Denver Broncos, first 1 to 20 wins, and you gotta force teams into your style of play. What the Jets did was, and I think they tried early. The week before, they were high flying. It was the Aaron Rodgers of old. They couldn't do that against the Broncos, and then they abandoned their running back in Breece Hall, who's supposed to be one of the most talented runners in the league. The Broncos forced the Jets into their style of play. The Broncos have to do that if they're going to have success. Again, no matter what's your version of success, Sean? Bo Nix look like a real player and they win 6 or 7 games, or man, this defense is a playoff defense. They might be able to get to 9 or 10 wins if they hit all green lights, if everything works perfect for the defense and the offense barely contributes. What do we want here? What are we wanting? And I'm not saying, I don't know for sure.
Realistically, what I would consider success for the Broncos really revolves around Bo Nix and Sean Payton. I think you need to find out if Bo Nix looks like your quarterback for, and I hate it when people say long-term because I don't know what that means in the NFL anymore, but does he look like your quarterback? Will you sign him to a new deal? Is he going to get one of those deals where he's going to get 35 million plus, which is what every quarterback that's in their second one you're going to get? Is Bo Nix going to be that kind of guy or not? Do you see those signs by the end of this year? That's one of the measurements of success. The other one is how this team looks under Sean Payton. And the wins and losses to me are secondary because unless you figured out with Bo Nix, if he's not the answer, then you need to go back into the draft and you need to take another swing at it, because one of the things we talked about, $35 million, right, for a quarterback. So think about this. All of a sudden, the idea is, I think it went out the window, and I think rightly so, when the Arizona Cardinals picked Josh Rosen, right?
And I went to Kyler next year.
Very next year, went like, not our guy, we're going to Kyler Murray. But now when you look at it, even what Bo Nix makes as the pick that he was in the first round over his contract is basically what Jared Stidham makes.
Yeah.
So even if you're picking a high first round quarterback, he's not in the top 3, and he doesn't pan out, so what? Take another swing.
Sean, if you're
now your backup, whatever.
I buck
we
trends
need to
of
know
history.
who he is.
I am not afraid to draft another quarterback in the first round next year.
I wouldn't.
Bo Nix is a total disaster. It was fool's gold. We were living a lie. The guy doesn't have enough arm strength, and it's just like he's a second too slow. And maybe it took Sean Payton a whole season to realize that. we're starting a whole nother topic and conversation here, but to go back into the first round, as an NFL team, if I'm a general manager, I'm always investing in the quarterback position.
Me
and
too.
That means if I have one, if I love a guy in the second round the next year, and you're thinking, man, you can't do that. That's a luxury addition. You need an extra offensive lineman to help this quarterback who may or may not be the one. I'll forever look back at this. Sports, especially as a general managership, is a gamble as a whole. The Kansas City Chiefs were 12-4 with Alex Smith leading them. A great story, resurgent, matured. He was a former number 1 overall pick, so he had the skill set. The Chiefs were building, taking those next steps. They go from 28 in the draft to 10 to draft Patrick Mahomes. They roll the dice on themselves. It's one of the greatest gambles on yourself as a franchise and as a coach, Andy Reid, in the history of the NFL. And what happened when you're thinking they needed one extra offensive lineman, another defensive star, they go and bring Patrick Mahomes in, and the rest, hold on, Sean, is history.
Wow.
Yes.
History
I just
still
did
being
that.
written, obviously.
Oh, of course. I mean,
look,
come on, man.
they needed the lineman too, and the Broncos do too. The Broncos are going to need a replacement for Garrett
Unheard
Cole,
of to draft
ideally.
Patrick Mahomes after you have Alex Smith and you went 12-4. It's
Right.
like, what are you doing? You're trying to Andy Reid. This Andy Reid, it's never going to get better than Michael Vick and Donovan McNabb. They already tried that thing. Well, again, he knew with McNabb wasn't enough.
So this is,
And he went
to
to
my
Vic.
mind, that's the idea for success. Well, it's not entirely about Bo Nix. It is mostly about Bo Nix, because I do think if you see enough from him, and I think I've already seen enough from Bo Nix to think, okay, this guy's probably, we have to see the passing get better, but probably going to be good enough to play in the league. I think he's an NFL player, right?
Probably.
But
this relationship will probably work out, Sean.
Yeah.
She's really super cute. I know she's got
that's the
some
thing.
baggage and
Potential
stuff.
gets
but
guys fired. That's the reality,
yeah.
right? And so I think for the measurement of this season, that's the idea. You look at it and say, can Nix play in the league? Yeah, he probably can. Is he going to be a guy that's probably going to spend more of his time as a backup than a starter? Zach Wilson, perhaps.
But does the running game carry us to the promised land and keep us
no,
like you said?
No, but what it does do is it allows you to evaluate Bo Nix more fairly, because you can ramp up what he can do when he's not running for his life. He's not your leading rusher, a guy that's not supposed to be anywhere near rushing, right? A pocket quarterback. That's a big deal to
his total should be like 18.5 a game.
Yeah.
And that's squirting to the sideline for a couple
And
first
it should
downs.
be probably 2 carries for 2 first downs. You're just scooting away to try to get
13.5, something like that.
And that's what you've gotten. The thing in the last couple of games, when you look at those numbers, Bo Nix, 35 yards in the first game, 25 in the second. Now, he did go up in the Tampa Bay game. One of those a really long scramble. But against the Jets, 3 yards.
Yeah.
Good. That's a good thing, because, there's going to be maybe one designed run, I guess, a game. That's fine. A little bit of deception.
3's the magic number. It's not sexy, but 3 times 4 is a first down every time. I know you're not running it 4 times, but that sets you up for 3rd and shorts, 2nd and 6th and 5th, and then the playbook opens up, and you can make it easy on.
And you can also
Nix,
find out what Nix can do
for him right now.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to find out what he can do.
So
you have to find out what he can do sooner than later.
Are you like this every single day?
Right?
No wonder you're so good.
But this is the idea behind it. But against a team like the Raiders, now you're 2-2.
Yeah.
And you have a chance to
must win.
Surprisingly, I agree with you. You
can't lose to these guys again.
No. And Max Crosby is expected to play, missed last week, so he's not 100%. He's probably coming back in part, too, because the Raiders are surrendering almost 140 yards per game on the ground. That's 24th in the NFL, 137.5. It's one of those games. I know Tyler Badie is in a spot where we're not sure what he's available to do, but both Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin were effective. I think the Broncos need to run the ball until the Raiders stop it.
Yes.
Which is what they did a lot in the second half against the Jets, and it helped them get a win.
Let's run with the narrative Javonte's back on accident, because you go through like Badie's the hot runner.
Right.
You go with him. You're forced to go back to Javonte, and Javonte's the guy who maybe, again, is our most talented guy, who was supposed to be some kind of hero a couple years ago. And it takes a whole extra year from coming back from an injury than anyone wants it or expects it to be. And if he's a guy was going for 70 or 80 yards a game on 17 to 20 touches. That's the recipe for success for this team, who and what they are.
Especially given the fact that you can mix in McLaughlin as a change of pace guy. Yeah. And then when he gets healthy and hopefully a couple of weeks, Estime can handle some of that goal line work, some of that short yardage work. You can get this done by committee. And for the Broncos, that's probably the best way to beat the Raiders this week. And that would put them not only in a winning record, but would then give them an up. They'd be at worst tied for second in the AFC West with a chance to take on the Chargers the week after that.
We got to go, but this game's a coin flip. And I think the Raiders are living a bit of a lie. I like their coach, who's a former player. He's got like that vibe with the aura with the young guys. He's like
nuked things with Devontae Adams.
I think, but they're overachieving. I think by the end of the year, the Raiders are a 5 or 6 win team, and the Broncos are going to be the start of kind of their demise a little bit.
Yeah, I don't love it as a CU guy, but if you're thinking where Shedeur Sanders lands, Las Vegas.
Stop it, Sean. I'm out of here.
Most likely spot.
How dare you?
He is Danny Williams. Dan, you can catch Danny every single morning on Mile High Sports Radio with his partner, Jeff Gersh. It is a fun listen.
Thanks,
that
Sean.
Kind of energy. Make sure you check it out. Danny, appreciate the time.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate
you. Love to do this again. If you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, then you need to look no further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. As a DAC member, you'll enjoy top-notch amenities like a full fitness center, licensed childcare center, a spa, massage, Pilates, a golf simulator, and even more. But what truly sets the DAC apart is that vibrant community. The member-owned club is all about you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The DAC is truly a club for your whole life. So look at joining the DAC today. You can visit Denver Athletic Club.cc for all of the details. Some interesting games in the most recent week in the NFL. Obviously, we're talking about kind of a weird situation here in which Nate and Nate Lundy joins us. Of course, I
was just going to let Danny keep
CEO,
going. Man.
Yeah, well, I thought he might, but you know,
Energizer Bunny on crack.
Definitely has the big energy, and that's a lot of fun. But this was a weird week in the NFL. And in fact, I would say early going on right now, it is sort of a weird start to the season in the NFL.
Sure.
We don't really know so much of what we're looking at with some of these teams is upended. And Danny talked about it a little bit too.
Yeah.
Are the Raiders overachieving at 2-2? Are the Broncos overachieving at 2-2? The Chiefs are unbeaten, but they look at times to be a little soft. And so what we learned this week is kind of telling. And let's start with, I guess, the biggest news coming forward. Devontae Adams of the Raiders sounds like he's on the way out. The Raiders are now being more aggressive in offering him as a trade. Now, don't think for a second that the Raiders haven't been quietly shopping Devontae Adams, because Devontae Adams came to the Raiders for one reason. And he told everyone what that reason was. It wasn't even because the Raiders were close to being Super Bowl contenders. He has played enough in his career, accomplished enough in his career. He wanted to play with his old college teammate and very close friend, Derek Carr. Carr then gets moved on to the Saints, and immediately after that, Adams has been prickly and unhappy ever since. Now the odds-on favorite for teams that he will get dealt to, because Adams can make things a little bit difficult if he's not, guess who? The Jets with Aaron Rodgers and the Saints with Derek Carr.
Yeah, and it should be. I expect nothing less. Look, I liked the notes about Antonio Pierce liking the story that Sports Illustrated had
on Instagram, right?
And I wish I could give credit to it, because these aren't my words. These are words that are already out there from a couple of other analysts. But I liked somebody earlier today that said Antonio Pierce needs to start acting like a coach and not a player. And I think he needs to do that. I think there's a difference between it's fine to be a player's coach, but the second part of that word is the most important one. And that is, you need to be a coach. You need to be a leader. You need to be smart. You need to know how to play the game. And I think that's a lot of what it takes to be a coach, is to understand how to do those things. And I think at this point, look, the toothpaste's out of the tube. He's not going to be in a Raiders uniform much longer. It's going to be a matter of what somebody will trade for him. Personally, I think he would be an absolutely spectacular upgrade for the Saints. I think he would be extremely valuable there, and he obviously would like to be able to be there with Derek Carr. I think that's actually the marriage that makes the most sense. And part of that is because I actually believe that Aaron Rodgers has some very good weapons there with the Jets. So I think he's okay without Devontae Adams, if I'm being honest, but I think putting him with the Saints in an extremely winnable division, by the way, is really valuable. So I think that's the number one storyline that we're all talking about right now that sort of erupted over the course of the last 36 hours or so, is where Davante Adams will be. I do not believe he is going to play in the silver and black anymore.
No, and I'd be surprised if he played against the Broncos this weekend as well, if he's even still on the team by then. And you're right. That the interesting part about it is the Jets are, as we know, all in right now, all in.
Yeah, they are. But
so could they lean over? But then again, what do they want to give up? I'm with you. I actually not only think the Saints are a better fit, I actually like the Saints' potential future as a playoff team in the NFC more than I like the Jets in the AFC.
And that's the reason
why
why
I
think
Davante Adams, that's where I'd want to go.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why if I'm Davante Adams, it's exactly what you just said. I think that where his push is going to be is towards the Saints. I think it makes the most sense because, Davante Adams is 32 years old. I believe. I'm not mistaken. I think he's 32. Anyway, point being, he's in his low 30s. At some point, you have to recognize, he's 31, excuse me, 31, Danny just corrected me. At some point, you have to realize that the tail end of the career is coming, okay? Yeah. Now, as part of that, there is a division and there is a team and there is a conference right now in New Orleans that allows him to say, I could go play there for 2-3 seasons. Maybe I don't have to make bank. I could just go there and play for a couple of seasons. I can play with the quarterback that I want to be able to play with. And we legitimately have a shot of taking the division. And if not, in a weaker NFC, being a playoff team. And I think that's one of the things that he can play for. You could build up a contract. Your agent can do this for you. You could build up a contract that's got all kinds of incentives and things like that built into it. And that'd be the smart way to do it if I'm Davante Adams, because there is still some talent around him in New Orleans.
Sure.
Like Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara looked like he's been drinking out of the fountain of youth. That Chris Olave is there. Like there's some talent on that team that he would be able to come in and supplement, but he doesn't have to be the guy. I think it would be smart for the Raiders because not only do you get rid of somebody who is in the midst of being disgruntled, it also lets you go, screw it. We're rebuilding. That's why we got Brock Bowers. That's why we did this. That's why we did this.
Jumpstart your rebuild.
Just jumpstart it. Gardner Minshew will not be the Raiders quarterback in 2025. Take it to the freaking bank. Okay. So you're in the midst of this. If you can get a second rounder, do it. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Get him out of conference.
If I were the Raiders, this deal would have already been done.
The Saints, as it stands today, would be a wild card team. The Dallas Cowboys would be out. So, I mean, they're already in position. And
that's just comical right there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that makes the most sense. But it's good news for the Broncos, and we'll talk obviously more about this over the course of the week. You get him out of the division, and, you have a very winnable game, and you probably won't have to face him this week, which is awfully nice. But looking around the NFL, we talked a little bit about Bo Nix with Danny Williams a bit ago.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Daniels.
Yes.
Now, I get it. We're talking handful of games in. But generally, the special ones, show it early. And I think in Daniels' case, one of the things, and it's kind of funny because it's not as if Caleb Williams has looked bad, and there's still, we're 4 games in. Chance he can be very, very, very good. But Daniels has kind of burst onto the scene, and everyone knew about the athleticism and the ability to run. That's not what's dazzling people. It's the passing, the accuracy, the be able to read NFL defenses, where we talked about the first week or so with Bo Nix getting used to NFL speed. Jaden Daniels popped into the league, apparently used to NFL speed. It's pretty special.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing out of him is special, but I would also say this. If we're not going to judge Bo Nix after 4 games, I'm not judging Jaden Daniels after 4 games either.
You shouldn't.
Everybody pump the brakes. Calm down, y'all. That's what I will say about it, because yes, has he looked good? Yes. Did he do it against a couple of solid teams in Arizona and in Cincinnati? Yes, he absolutely did. Is Cincinnati playing anything like what any of us thought they would be? Hell no.
Mess.
They have looked like absolute hot garbage. And I said before, I'm going to say it again. Something's going on between Joe Burrow's ears, and he needs help. They have got to figure out the mental side of it for Burrow, because something is not right. So all of that put together, Am I going to continue to enjoy watching Jaden Daniels? Yes, of course I am. But I'm also not going to, if you want to crown him, crown him. I'm not going to play that game 4 games into the season any more than I'm going to play it about what Caleb Williams is or what Bo Nix is or what Brock Bowers is. Or I don't know, list off every damn draft pick from last year if you want to. Has he been special? Yes. You know what I have found in the National Football League over the years? Give a defensive coordinator a half a dozen games worth of film, and they'll figure out how to stop you.
Yeah. Well, how do you then gauge? And let's take a look at maybe the side with Minnesota Vikings.
Now, the fact that they're leading the NFC East,
that's
I love it. I love the chaos.
Hilarious. The Vikings, by the way, 4-0, the only unbeaten team in the NFC, only one of 2 in the entire league, along with Kansas City. Sam Darnold looking completely revitalized. I told y'all that them losing JJ was not going to be that big of a deal if you looked at the advanced metrics of Sam Darnold. I said that in the preseason. I didn't expect 4-0, but I also didn't think this team was going to suddenly tank because JJ McCarthy got hurt. Well, what in Darnold's game made you think that something like this was possible?
He had the advanced analytics that show if you can put him behind a solid offensive line. And Minnesota has for a while had an above average offensive line. I'm not going to call it elite. I'm not going to put it all the way up there, but Minnesota's had a pretty damn good offensive line here for a little while. Okay. And you put all of that together, he's got it up here. Okay. He's been in some bad situations before, but if you started to dial into the analytics that happen, if he's got over X seconds to throw the ball, if he's got those kinds of things around him, and I'm sorry, he has the best wide receiver in the game on his huddle with him.
No question.
He's right there every single game. And if that is the case, that provides you with a level of confidence that I would argue Sam Darnold has not always had over the course of his career. So do I think the Vikings regret drafting JJ? Absolutely not. But I don't think the panic had to set in, I know we were talking SCO Buffs earlier, SCO Vikings.
Yeah, SCO.
In that fan base. I think there was this panic. And I remember saying, look, until I see it on the field, I don't know for sure. But man, look at Darnold's numbers, man. Like, this is a guy that if you can just put him in the right situation, I don't think it's going to be terrible. Like I said, did I expect 4-0? No. But I thought minimum 2-2 and maybe 3-1. And some of that was just based on how their schedule lined up to start off the season. I thought Sam Darnold could get it done.
And bringing that back to a little bit to Bo Nix, because that's it. We look at the styles of quarterbacks in the league, the stars. And we talked a little bit earlier before you came on about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, elite athletes that could do everything.
Yeah.
You have guys that are sort of creative wizards, Nikola Jokic like and Patrick Mahomes, who sees things that other people do not see. Those are really, truly special guys. I don't think Bo Nix is one of those guys, but there are a lot of guys like Baker Mayfield, like Sam Darnold, like Derek Carr, guys that if you put a good team around them and a good system around them, they can check the boxes for you and you can win a lot of games. Now, if the Vikings are down 14 points in the fourth quarter, are they probably going to win? No, I don't think Darnold's that guy. I don't think Carr's that guy. I don't think a lot of players are that guy. I don't think Mayfield's that guy. But could Bo Nix be Mayfield, Carr, or Darnold, and in the right system, win you a lot of football games? I think he could. I think it's important for Broncos fans to get that expectation correct as we get into an AFC West that's becoming pretty fascinating.
Well, and look, the other thing that plays into it, you talked about putting somebody within the right situation. And I know you're going to talk to Aarif Deen here in a second, but let me finish with this thought. It goes, you want to tie it back to Bo Nix and the Broncos? We can do it right here. You know what Minnesota's averaging per game on the ground? About 125 yards. Get it done on the ground so that it's not all on Sam Darnold's shoulders. And that is what the Vikings are doing right now. They're playing very smart. They're doing some really, really smart things to make it so that Sam Darnold can be successful. I think over the first couple of weeks, Sean Payton was way too arrogant with his game planning and what he thought would work. And that over the course of the last couple of games, you have seen that loosen up and put Bo into better positions. Is he still going to throw interceptions and screw up? Yes, he is, because he's a rookie. And I believe the same thing will wind up happening with Jaden Daniels. I believe the same thing will wind up happening with Caleb Williams, and we can keep going down the list. But The thing that is going to decide Minnesota's future, in my opinion, from what I have seen so far, is not being worried too much about Sam Darnold. It's they got to figure out their defense.
Right.
Minnesota's got some defensive issues right now. They are allowing way too many yards through the air. They need to find a way to be able to contain some of those kinds of things from an offensive perspective, because if they don't, then they are going to wind up, Sean, in the position that you just talked about, where they're down by 14 points and you're trying to make a comeback because you've given up too many points. That's what Minnesota's got to figure out. But, man, like I said, I'm going to pull a muscle, pat myself on the back. I said that they didn't need to panic that it was Sam Darnold, right? They didn't. I still believed that the NFC North was going to be one of the most entertaining battles all year long between Minnesota, Detroit, and Green Bay. And I still think that's going to be the case as long as Jordan Love gets back to 100%.
Yeah,
so
it should be a lot.
My only thought. By the way, speaking of Minnesota, I miss the North Stars. I miss throwing it back to the North Stars in the NHL. I remember before they went down south. But you're going to talk some Avs with Aarif Deen, and I am going to get out of the way.
We will, and we'll be back with Nate with just a little bit. But Aarif Deen joins us, host of Rinkside with Aarif Deen, the podcast there over at ColoradoHockeyNow.com. Congratulations at that role as well. And, of course, you hear Aarif Deen here all the time on the station. Aarif, thank you for joining us. Last night, the Avs lost to the Golden Knights 6-1 in the preseason. They dropped to 0-4 in the preseason. First thing to keep in mind, it's the preseason, and a lot of players who are playing in the preseason don't end up on the regular roster, so I don't want to overreact to it. But at the same time, in this preseason with 2 more games remaining, the Avs will open the regular season a week from tonight against the same Vegas Golden Knights. The Avs have been outscored 19-8 in the 4 games in the preseason. What are you seeing in the early going here from the players that you know are going to be on the roster?
I'm seeing a lot of days off. We haven't seen a lot of the top guys play a lot of games or a lot of minutes, and when they are in the lineup, it doesn't really look like they're doing much. And I've made this mistake in the past of reading too much into preseason. I think we do it a lot in every single sport, but I can't find myself to worry about results in preseason anymore. I don't think it really truly does matter. The first year Jared Bednar coached the Avalanche, we all remember the 22-win season. The Avs went undefeated in the preseason. Take it to football. We all remember the Lions going 0-16, but they were 4-0 in the preseason. So I really can't really care too much about it. But what I have seen from the Avalanche in the preseason this year is they went out of their way to keep a bigger training camp roster for a lot longer than a lot of other teams. They made 10 cuts about 12 hours ago. To reduce their roster down to 30. They were at 40. There weren't even a lot of teams left in the 30s by then. So they kept a ton of guys around for a long time to save the veterans from playing. Makar, McKinnon, and Rantanen all played their first game. Drouin and Middlestat have yet to dress. We've seen Devon Taves once. We've seen Sam Girard once. I don't think we've seen Josh Manson yet. So they've been giving a lot of opportunities to guys that, quite frankly, just aren't NHLers, not on this team, not with the depth and the talent this team has. So Sean Behrens has played a lot. TJ Tynan has played a lot. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, of course, you want him to center your fourth line. They've been playing the heck out of him. They've played a lot of Cal Ritchie, Yuri Inala, Nikolai Kovalenko. They're spotlighting the guys, even Ivan, as you have at the bottom. They're spotlighting the guys that they're trying to see if they have a fit on this roster, rather than spotlighting them alongside the players they're going to play with. So they're trying to see which 2 wingers are going to stick out enough to play with Casey Middlestat without even playing them with Casey Middlestat. They're trying to see who can separate themselves from the pack. Is it the right thing to do? I think it's a little weird that you want to see who fits with Casey Middlestat without playing them with Middlestat until the last 2 games of the preseason, which is what's going to happen starting tomorrow in Utah. But all of those are kind of why these results just don't matter. It's more of the individual performances.
Yeah, and speaking of then those, we talk about those prospects in particular. Like I feel like Kovalenko is probably as close to a lock as you're going to get. We saw him in the playoffs. He looks good. He looks NHL ready. We know about the mindset. But let's focus in specifically on Cal Ritchie. Obviously, there's a weird position there because if he doesn't end up making the roster, you can play him for a couple of games like usual. But he doesn't go back to the Eagles. He can go back to juniors. So what have you seen from Cal Ritchie? Do you think he looks close to making this team? Do you think he breaks with camp? Or do you think it's one of those situations where he's later in the year or maybe even the playoffs like we saw with Kovalenko?
So that would depend on what happens with his OHL season. But once the Avalanche send him down, he has to stay there the whole year. The reality is I think he will get 9 games minimum. So once you reach past 9 games, it burns the first year of your entry-level contract. So that's something the Avalanche are not going to want to do unless they absolutely need to. They're not going to want to do that unless Ritchie gives them a reason to say, you are staying on this team the entire season. But with that, the fact that they can give him 9 games and it doesn't affect his contract status and it doesn't affect anything, and without Lehkonen, Nichushkin, and Landeskog, you may as well see what you got in the kid. So he has shown flashes of brilliance. We also saw that fake shot goal that he scored on the breakaway against Utah. That was a lot of fun. The NHL, Twitter and Instagram and social media feeds all had a lot of fun with that as well. But Jared was very forward with you see the flashes of offensive brilliance, and he called the goal insane, but he said that he did struggle on the defensive side of things. We know how much Jared loves his structure, and it's what makes this team a winning team. And for a 19-year-old, he's going to need to get up to speed, Cal Ritchie, to be a part of that system. So do I think he's on the opening night roster? Yes. Do I think he's going to play games in October? Yes. If you ask me if he's going to be here past the 9-game mark, and it's not Avalanche 9 games, it's him 9 games. So if you ask me if he's going to play himself more than 9 regular season games, I'd say it's about a 30% chance. With the 70% of him not playing, I can flip that to a 70-30 chance if he gives the team a reason to say, with Landeskog, with Nichushkin, with Lehkonen, Cal Ritchie's a top 12 forward.
And that's, I think, the question that they have to ask. And that's where I wonder where the strategy is, Aarif. The idea that you do have a lot of young guys. You have a lot of young guys that are intriguing. And knowing that you won't have Landeskog to start the season, you won't have, obviously, Nichushkin to start the season. So do you think that Jared Bednar is interested in basically having maybe the early parts of October essentially being experimentation with lines, with talent, with youth? Are the Avs sort of okay with that, or do they want to make sure that they stick a little more with the veterans and come off to a good start? Which matters more, do you think?
No, it's absolutely going to be the first one. It's absolutely going to be the experimentation. They want to see what they have with these guys. And Jared said yesterday after the loss to Vegas, Jared Bednar said that his something that he likes to do is, or something that he's noticed with himself, is he's obviously a lot more patient in the beginning of the season than he is closer to the playoffs. He's willing to accept mistakes, obviously, as long as they're not repeatable. But what you have with this team right now is, so last night, Bednar put Kovalenko with Nate and Mikko, and he played pretty well. He looked like an Arturi Lehkonen light. Evan Rowell, one of the other media guys, he tweeted something that was so obvious, that every time Mikko Rantanen got the puck into the offensive zone, he, without even pause, just dumped it into the corner and just let Kovalenko go after it, because he was testing the kid. Go in there and fight and dig and be the puck hound that Lehkonen and Nichushkin are in the corners. So it was almost like Rantanen just was standing straight, wasn't even trying, just dumps into the corners and lets Kovalenko battle for the puck. And Kovy did well. So the experimentation part of this is, well, maybe there's an opportunity. And I asked Jared Bednar about this yesterday, and he wouldn't commit to it yet. But maybe now you're starting to say, hey, we don't need to play Drouin with McKinnon and Rantanen. We can play Drouin with Middlestat, spread the wealth, and maybe put Ritchie with Drouin and Middlestat, maybe put Kovalenko with Nate and Mikko. So there's going to be a lot of experimentation. Bednar, without pause, without us even asking, even referenced the idea after morning skate on Tuesday of, hey, maybe I shift Ross Colton to the wing. Maybe if, maybe Cal Ritchie plays third line center, maybe Ross Colton joins the top 6 as a winger. So they're going to do a ton of experimenting. Bednar's already got that in his mind. The team knows that they have the time to do it. And it's the same thing with the defensemen. They're not going to send down any of these 8 guys until they need to. And right now they don't need to, because they have the cap space, because Nichushkin's 6.125 is not counted against their cap until he's reinstated.
We're speaking to Aarif Deen. Check out the podcast Ringside with Aarif Deen, as well as the season that starts in a week for the regular season for the Avalanche. And defense is where I wanted to go next. They have a lot of skaters, obviously, in camp right now, even after the moves last night to pare the roster by 10. But the 8 guys that are there are interesting. We know about the top pairings. We know about McCarr and Taves. We know about Manson and Girard. But you look at the final 4 guys, Malinsky's the only other right-handed shot that would be unaccounted for in those 4 that we know aren't going to be on the top 2 pairs. And I think Malinsky's performance probably puts him in maybe an inside track to be on that 3rd pairing. But who do you look at otherwise? Brandstrom's a fascinating guy. That they signed Chilington later in free agency. DeHaan's more of a veteran. Where do you think they're looking?
So both Shillington and Brandstrom have played on the right.
My fault on the pronunciation.
Oh, yeah. You're all good. It's KYL. It's not the easiest name to grasp.
I got a week.
Yeah. But Shillington and Brandstrom have both played on the right and on the left. So those are both options. I actually thought that Shillington and Brandstrom would be the 3rd pair to start the season. But Sam Malinsky has far and away, kind of like what you said about Kovalenko, Sam Malinsky separated himself in the pack. He has earned the number 5 spot on this team. It's a matter of number 6 now, and you got 3 guys that are fighting for that. Now, the biggest thing to remember with DeHaan, Brandstrom, and Shillington is these are all new guys to the team, and especially so DeHaan is a veteran. He's that Jack Johnson replacement, the veteran guy. You know what you got from him at this age, at this point. But then you got a couple of younger guys in Brandstrom and Shillington who are low risk, high reward signings, and we saw the Avalanche make these in the past at forward with Rodriguez, then Tatar, then Drouin. And specifically those final 2 names in Tatar and Drouin. Obviously, Tatar was a little bit older, but when you look at those 2 guys, they started last season struggling, both of them. And they were both healthy scratched at one point. They were both on the top line at one point, and it took each of them a while to figure it out. By the time the season was half old, Tomas Tatar was shipped out of town, and Jonathan Drouin went from being a healthy scratch and 1 assist in his first 10 games to being a guy that was playing 27 minutes a night with Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, coming back from a 3-0 deficit against the Penguins. Like, his season flipped on a dime. But it took both Tatar and Drouin a little bit of time. So that's me trying to say that Malinsky has familiarity with this system. He's an older guy. This is his 2nd training camp. He played well last year with the Avalanche and knew what to work on, worked on it, got better at it, has solidified a spot. I'm not ready to write off Shillington and Brandstrom yet, but I do think that Calvin DeHaan will be in the opening night lineup while the Avalanche wait to see which of Brandstrom or Shillington step up. And I do think all 4 of those guys, and I don't think Malinsky will be scratched at any point unless there's an injury, but all 4 of those guys will play games in October because the Avalanche, like I said, earliest possible reinstatement for Val is November 13th. Until then, they have the flexibility to say, let's carry all 8 of these guys. Let's see what we got so that when Val's back, if we need to send one to the minors and, pass him through waivers, which might be difficult, we know who we're willing to get rid of at this point. Right now, they just don't know what they have. But Calvin DeHaan to me says, as the veteran, as the guy that you know what you're going to get, well, assuming nothing changes over the next week, there's still 2 preseason games for Brandstrom and Shillington to show up. But I think DeHaan will play opening night, but all 3 of those guys will get opportunities with Malinsky.
Yeah, and I think that's the way I look at it too. Malinsky is safe, and I think actually when we're talking about DeHaan, he's safe because of that Jack Johnson role, right? Even if Brandstrom or Shillington step up and they look like they should be paired with Malinsky on that 3rd pair, you're still going to want DeHaan in that Jack Johnson role where maybe he plays, maybe he's not playing, but you want him as a 7th defenseman because he can step in and be responsible. So I look at Malinsky as a lock, and I look at DeHaan as a lock, although we just don't know necessarily what the role will be. So that simplifies. And maybe in the next 2 preseason games, I keep an eye out for Brandstrom and Shillington because those are 2 guys that, at least in the longer term, are probably going for 1 spot.
Yeah, that's ultimately a good way to look at it. It's not that DeHaan is a lock for a top 6 role, but I think he's a lock to be on this roster unless his game completely trails off, which it hasn't. He's a guy that also played 40-something games last year, was healthy scratched a lot with the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially in the playoffs. So he is, looks like more open to being a healthy scratch. Jack Johnson hasn't been healthy scratch the last couple of years. So this is a guy that is going to be able to, be willing to accept that role if that's what it comes to. But at the same time, if Shillington and Brandstrom both play well, the Avalanche, they can even still carry 8 defensemen when Nichushkin's healthy because they'll just be able to kind of maneuver with carrying lesser forwards and only staying at 12, sometimes 13. But obviously you're not going to do that unless all 8 of these guys are doing well. All 8 of these guys fit into the system, and we can't possibly lose any one of them because we need depth heading into the playoffs, which obviously is something that this is always necessary when guys like Manson, Makar, and Gerard get hurt or miss time.
Last one for you, Aarif. Let's turn to the goaltending. For the first time in a while, it feels like the Avalanche know, even health related and everything, what they've got in net with Alexander Georgiev and Justus Annunen. When you look at that pairing in the early going, is there any reason to believe that the Avs are anything but comfortable? There has been some idea that with Georgiev up for a new contract relatively soon, that perhaps the Avs may be looking to upgrade that position.
It's going to be pretty similar to last year. It's going to be two guys that you're comfortable starting with, but knowing very well that if things hit the fan down the road, a move will need to be made. I'm not sold on Justus Annunen 100% yet. I'm not saying he's a bad goalie. I'm just saying that I still don't think we've seen enough to comfortably say this is a backup goalie in the NHL. And he might be. He might be the guy that sticks around, or by December 1st, you have me on the show. We're talking about the next Jake Allen or Marc-Andre Fleury or whatever, like last season, like we were doing with the goalie market. So you never know. And then you got Georgiev, who last year gave you a lot of reasons to not be so confident in him. And then he picked it up in the playoffs after game 1 against Winnipeg. But in 2023, he gave you a lot of reasons why he is a very more than capable goalie to win a Stanley Cup for this team, or at least lead them to the playoffs, I should say. So both options, are they comfortable with them right now? Yes. Do they need to make a waiver wire pickup like last year because Frankie was injured and they had to pick up Prosvetov because Annunen wasn't ready? No, I don't think they need to do that. But if things go well, things go well. If they don't, ultimately what I'm saying is you're not the Islanders. You don't have Sorokin and Varlamov knowing very well that these guys are playing the entire season. You have two guys that are very comfortable playing those roles, but if any of them falters, you're making a move.
Questions remain for the Avalanche. 2 more preseason games, as Aarif mentioned, tomorrow in Vegas, and then they'll play a neutral site with the Utah hockey team to finish off the preseason. A week from tonight, the puck drops for real. You want to make sure, if you're not following Aarif on social media already, you absolutely want to, and catch his coverage that he puts together for the Avs everywhere. And make sure you subscribe to the new podcast, Rinkside with Aarif Deen. Does a terrific job with it. Aarif, it's always a treat to get to talk to you about the Avs. I always enjoy every one of them. Looking forward to the season starting out, and hopefully we'll get to keep doing this. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Sean. And I do want to clarify, I don't know if there was a little bit of confusion. All of my writing is at Colorado Hockey Now. Rinkside with Aarif Deen is a Mile High Sports podcast. So I have not taken that. So I am still part of the Mile High Sports team as a podcaster, and I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to do these radio shows.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So thanks again, and have a great week.
Thank you. You as well, Sean. Appreciate
All right. Thank you so much. It is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays, we talk a little bit about mental health and wellness, and that's where our friend Dr. Rick Perea comes in. Dr. Rick's been one of the leading performance psychologists across the sports world for the last decade or so with the Broncos when they won Super Bowl 50. He's worked with the Rockies when they made the playoffs. That actually happened. They didn't lose 100 all the time, and has been able to help them over the years. But he also helps local athletes, younger athletes, people in high school and college. And more than that, he can help you, whether you're instead of the athletic days have gone by and you're working your time in your job, whatever it is, we can always do a little bit better with a checkup from the neck up and a little bit of a mental tune-up. And sometimes that's a little bit of hard work and a little bit of humility, and we have to be able to do that. And that's where Dr. Rick Perea can help. So go check out everything he puts together at think1foryou.org. That's think1, the number foryou.org. Learn about Dr. Rick and his team, and you can also get more from him on Wellness Wednesdays right here on Mile High Sports. So check it out. Dr. Rick Perea, performance psychologist. Think One For You is the website, and on Wellness Wednesdays, get your checkup from the neck up with Dr. Rick. Nate, thanks for coming back here because baseball playoffs are underway. Well, right now again, and yesterday, if you were a fan of the Underdog, you did pretty well because 3 of the 4 wild card teams end up getting their wins over the higher seeded teams. Not a shock in the last few years. Many of the World Series participants, if not always the winners, have come out of the wild card. The idea that baseball was diluting itself by adding this, I think especially over the last couple of years, and yesterday another example, that goes right out the window. These teams that are in the playoffs deserve to be in the playoffs. They all have winning records, not by a game or two. They've had good seasons, and I think as you show in game 1, that's why they're here in the postseason.
Yeah, they really are. I think the biggest surprise from yesterday, frankly, for me was Anilo's Mets.
Boy,
and that's simply because of runs. Yeah, and it's also just because of how they got there
with the travel and the double header.
Well, and I think the other piece to it was I also expected a little bit more out of the Brewers having just played them, to be able to keep them under control. But you're right. I mean, if you look at the schedule from yesterday, the road team won in the first 3 games, and then the Padres. Frankly, I think the Padres ran with the energy of Tatis and his home run in the first inning and just kind of ran with it from there. I think that San Diego played off their crowd. It was very happy to have some postseason baseball there. And I think San Diego just kind of rolled from there. And it's been fun to watch the Padres. But I think the biggest question coming into today, and right now it's scoreless with Detroit and Houston. They're underway in the second inning. I think the biggest question for me from the baseball standpoint as we look at the playoffs here is, Sean, that Baltimore team has a lot of offensive power, and they lost 1-0.
Yep.
They struck out 10 times yesterday in that game at home. So to me, this is a lot about looking at the action today. Houston is battle tested, and I think Detroit knows that. So like right now, from a betting perspective, there's a lot of folks that said, well, you got to go with Houston. They got to be able to bounce back. Well, the truth is Detroit knows that. And I don't think Detroit wants to give them a chance to, if I'm being honest. And so I think that, Detroit, who, started off with Horton on the bump for today, they're basically, starting off with a relief pitcher. I mean, hell, he pitched a third of an inning yesterday. He's who they put on the bump here to be able to start out today. I think they're going with some interesting rotations, but, the big question for me is when we get to the second game on the schedule today, and that is Kansas City and Baltimore.
Right.
Look, there's part of me that's kind of rooting for the Royals. I kind of like the small market teams and what they're able to do. But I'll be very curious to see what Baltimore does because of you had all this offensive power and they managed 0 runs, 5 hits, and struck out 10 times yesterday.
And you get it was one of those examples again of where the Royals, and give them credit, they definitely still they won the World Series back in 2015, but they still do the same thing. A bunch of get on base, take the extra base with the steal if you have to, take the extra base going first to third, run around. They ended up getting the single, the steal. Witt gets the single to knock in the run. Yep. That was the entire amount of scoring. And the Royals did not stop attempting to steal. They will put pressure on you. They still play that small ball. And when you have you talk about Baltimore's talent, they have a lot of power. Henderson, of course, leading the way, but a little bit of going back to maybe even Earl Weaver, Orioles management. They're waiting for the 3-run home run, and yesterday it didn't get there.
Yeah, they were waiting for something like that. But when you have the kind of power that you have with Adley Rutschman, when you have
who's
that
a mess, by the way, the last half of the season was
it was not good for Adley, former Oregon State Beef. But when you look at him, when you look at what Santander has, I mean, there's a lot of power on that team. I want to go back to something that you said about Kansas City, though. Here's where I give the Royals a ton of credit, and it doesn't take look, if this guy can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. No one in Major League Baseball in 2024 allowed more stolen bases than Corbin Burns. It's not even close. Okay. He allowed 41 stolen bases this year.
Nice.
Okay. That is 8 more than the pitcher in second place. So what Kansas City did was recognize if it was going to be small ball and it was going to be game 1 against Corbin Burns, you did exactly what you should do, which is that even like Witt got caught stealing at one point, didn't stop him, right? You just keep doing it because Corbin Burns, like I said, nobody gave up more stolen bases than Corbin Burns did this season. So I think Kansas City played it exactly the way they should, Sean, and that's really smart. Now, one of the things you and I talked about off air before we were getting ready for today's show is some of the betting things. Obviously, I mean, I keep betting on baseball. I don't know. We're up 20 something units this summer so far. This gets a lot more complicated to bet, folks, because you get a lot tighter. You get the best pitchers, and things like that. And so you have to pay attention to very, very subtle things if you decide you do want to bet when it comes to the baseball playoffs, and in particular these wild card games, which I think can be sometimes unpredictable, like I said, with the Mets, and what they were able to do in game 1 yesterday. So be smart about how you're betting. A bet that frankly just hit on the screen that's sitting over Danny's shoulder. The no-run first innings I mean, it happened in 2 out of the 4 games yesterday.
Right.
Why? Because you've got your best
2
pitchers
of the
on.
games were shutouts.
Well, and you've also got the idea here is as long as you didn't get hosed up towards the end of the season with your rotation, you've probably got one of, if not your best pitcher on the mound. Like for all of Corbin Burns' fault,
And he pitched 8 innings and gave up 1 run.
Yeah, I mean, he still only gave up 1 run. I mean, yeah, you can steal bases on him, but he still did exactly what you could have asked him to. The problem was that Baltimore's bats didn't come to the plate. So pay attention to some of those kinds of things if you are thinking about betting on postseason baseball, or if you're like me and you're just filling the gap between football games and you're filling the time on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, which is basically what I do. But look, simplify things, okay? So as an example, I'm not even going to give you specific bets for it, but throughout the regular season, I did, Sean, a lot of baseball same game parlays that usually had 4+ legs to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In postseason, I mean, I hit a couple yesterday that were 2 legs, where all I'm doing is saying, hey, I need this guy to have 5 strikeouts and I need this guy to get a hit. Right. I'm lowering way down my expectations because it tends to be when the pitching gets tighter. And I know, we talked about them scoring 8 runs and look, that sort of thing's going to happen.
Yeah, but that was an anomaly across the whole baseball yesterday.
It was an anomaly for yesterday because even with everything that San Diego was able to do yesterday, it still, frankly, came down to that home run that Tatis hit in the first.
They only had 5 hits.
I mean, that was it. It just happened to be extremely well timed. And King was, holy cow. That was Greg Maddux-esque what he was doing yesterday to the Braves.
12 Ks to 7 innings, no walks.
It was but if you were watching any of that game, which I was, it was like I had an SGP. I had a same game parlay last night that didn't hit because I expected King to give up at least 1 walk, which he had basically done in every game this year except 1. And he all of a sudden looked like Maddux, and the Braves couldn't find the ball coming off of his hand. They were swinging at crap that was like, they were swinging at stuff that was 16 inches off the plate. And it was because of the movement and the disguise that he had in his pitches. Holy crap, did he look good? Yeah,
that's an interesting part too, because even though you look at the fact that these series were best of 3, and they all happen at the higher seeds place, that's the advantage, right? Because you have division winners now playing wild card teams. Only a couple of teams end up getting the buys, so a more incentive again to avoid getting in the wild card. You won't even get a home game in that series. You have to win 2 out of 3 on the road. I think that's a good way of evening it out. But nevertheless, Nate, the winner of game 1, since they've gone to the 3-game wild card series, advances 88% of the time. It is a massive advantage to get that first, because when you're talking about games this tight and this close with teams, again, you look at the Tigers Astros game that just started, right? You're thinking, well, geez, the Tigers are a wild card, the Astros are a division winner. I mean, they can't be all that close. The Astros won 2 more games, 2 than the Tigers. So the difference is not that immense. The teams that are remaining are all really good. They're all actually a lot closer to you than you think. The Orioles, 5 games better than the Royals. But you think about the Mets and the Brewers only 4 games better, and the Padres only 4 games better than the Braves. So these games are tight, and it becomes hard to win 2 in a row against another team. So, when you're down 0-1, it's tough. And I think that makes this really, really intriguing.
Well, look back at like to make your point for you, Sean, look back at last season. Okay. If you look at the 2023 wild card, all 4 series were swept by the road team. All of them. All of the series were sweeps. Texas did it in 2. Minnesota did it in 2. Arizona did it in 2. Philly did it in 2. All of them were sweeps, and all of them were sweeps by the road team. That's amazing if you consider what happened last year in the wild card. And I think that, we talk about the people that didn't like the idea of diluting the postseason. I think all you have to do is look at last year.
You diluted it.
And those people need to shut up.
It's better.
It's clear. It's better.
Give this to baseball. Look, the last couple of years, right? You had the the tie break in the regular season, the California tie break where you have the runner on second. I know a lot of people hate it. The point is that
they move things along.
On a Tuesday night, the kids aren't out till 11 p.m. waiting for whatever until you can get them home and watch the game. So
the kids are still out till 11, Sean.
Yeah, well, not all. They're just not all.
They're just doing nefarious.
But
activities.
yeah, I get the point. But teams also have travel.
Danny's
days,
out till
and
11.
You want to
smash.
Yeah. But the Danny Williams, who was here earlier,
both of them.
Oh, okay, gotcha. But
your name is Danny. You're smashed at 11 o'clock.
The idea behind it, the changes. You had the tie break.
Glover,
not everybody's favorite.
Williams. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The walk. They're basically just saying like we're just walking you. People were worried about
I love that.
Once every other year, somebody throws a wild pitch on intentional walk. These things were all designed to make it better for fans. Now the pitch clock, and I told everyone about this. Remember, by the way, the pitch clock is not a new rule. The pitch clock was actually set in 1920. It just took baseball more than 100 years to enforce it. You can look it up. It was a rule in 1920. Baseball finally enforces it. Limiting mound visits. What they've done was designed to make it better for the baseball viewer, and it's done that. But what it's also done is it's made the game better because it is crisper, it is tighter, it is faster. And despite what you may have heard, baseball players, let's imagine, okay, you're back when I did playing second base, right? I don't want to stand for 45 seconds in between every pitch. Throw the pitch. I'm ready to go. This is a sport that has gotten better because the pace picked up. The pitchers can work at their pace. You keep all the nonsense from the batters from stepping out and doing all their stuff. Get in there, play ball. And it's made the sport not only more watchable, it's the only of the four major sports that's average attendee has gotten younger over the last 2 years. That's the only sport in which that's happened. And now all of a sudden you're seeing some of the baseball ratings come along too, because the sport itself is better. If you haven't been watching baseball thinking it's the slow game that maybe you didn't pay attention to the playoffs 5 years ago, you're missing out.
They're also not watching. They're also not watching it because they're in Denver. And there's nothing fun to watch. There's nothing fun to watch about the Rockies, and the most fun part, in my opinion, just retired. So look, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had in this, and pay attention to the small ball, because let me throw this at you. I was just making fun of Corbin Burns, right? The pitcher in the wild card round, the only starting pitcher in the wild card round who has given up in the neighborhood of Corbin Burns is Sean Manaea. And he's starting for the Mets today.
Yeah, guess who goes to?
So you want a quick bet off the top of my head? Bryce Terang, stolen base, for the Brewers. That would be my bet. And by the way, I told you Corbin Burns was at 41. Sean Manaea is at 23.
Yeah. And the Brewers, of course, have to be aggressive after losing the opener. They've got to find a way to generate.
Yeah, they need to be aggressive. I think they will do some of that on the base paths. Bryce Terang has been extremely successful on the base paths for them all season long, so they can totally go with Bryce. If he gets on base to, whether it's by walk or single, I think that you can look for him to try to get something done, to try to move things along for them as they try to be able to even up the series. The only other pitcher that's even in the ballpark is Marcus Stroman, who's at 25. And obviously the Yankees are just sitting around waiting right now. So those are the little things I look for from a sports betting standpoint. But I mean, yesterday was a lot of fun, man. The back and forth. I mean, the Brewers jumped on the Mets early. You thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. And then the Mets were like, see ya. They put their foot on the gas. So I thought the Brewers actually had a much better shot yesterday than they did before the Mets put 8 on the board. So that'll be fun. Tomorrow we got the Thursday edition of the program, Sean, which means we got some Thursday night football to be able to talk about. We've got some Thursday college football to be able to talk about. And of course, we'll find out whether we still have any wild card games or if it's going to be like last year where they all ended in a sweep.
All sweeps, 4 games in a row today for baseball. And yeah, we'll get back at it. Buccaneers and Falcons, and an interesting Thursday night football game tomorrow for the NFL. We'll also find out more about the Raiders situation. Max Crosby looking to play in the game. We'll know a little bit more tomorrow as well as we continue to break that down. So we'll be back at it and get ready for the Broncos Raiders week. In a Broncos Raiders week that actually matters. It's been a while since we've had one of those. As Danny Williams put it earlier in the program, can it be must win in week 5? Yeah, it kind of can. And maybe This one kind of is. So we'll talk more about that as well. Thanks to Danny Williams for joining us as well. You can check him out at Mile High Sports Radio every morning with his partner, Jeff Gersh. An awfully fun show to listen to. Make sure you check that out. And of course, like all of them, you can get them on demand as well. MileHighSports.com with the free Mile High Sports app. Go ahead and check it out. You can listen to everything that we put together there as well, including what we're doing right here on Mile High Sports today. So thanks to Danny for joining us. Thanks to Aarif Deen for the Avs coverage. The Avs started out in a week. There are fewer people more excited about that than the man on my right, Nate Lundy. Always good to talk to Nate, and however many segments we get to make this happen as we to bring you the best of Mile High Sports as best we can every single day. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth that makes all of it work. The most important person, you. Thank you for listening. However you did so, whether it was YouTube or the radio, you took it on demand, whatever. We appreciate it. We look forward to having you back tomorrow. I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports Today. We'll catch you then.